4, 3, 2.
When people look at this, they're going to say, oh, there's Chuck. What's your full name, Chuck?
Chuck Goehring. Charles Edward Goehring.
Okay. Who gave you the name? How did you get?
My father's name was Charles.
Uh-huh.
I'm assuming they named me after him.
Okay.
In fact, at one point I was the third.
Oh.
Picked up Chuck when I was in high school and always stayed with me, except like at my retirement dinner, my sister spoke and she called me Charles, and she told everybody there that she just couldn't call me Chuck. She and Marty Rigg are the only two people that can't call me Chuck.
Is that right?
I don't answer to Charles. I don't. It's it's just something that I forgot.
Where did the Edward come from?
I don't know.
Okay.
Don't have any idea. Maybe my father's brother. His name was Edward.
Okay. Good. That's logical. Sounds good anyway.
Never thought of it.
Who's the nickname then was Chuck, or was there another nickname that you were?
No.
That was it?
That was it.
Now, what's your present family situation, if I can put it that way? What's?
I'm single.
Mm-hmm.
I have 2 children, one 31, the other 30. They're out on their own. My daughter has moved back in with me. She had a child. I'm a grandfather.
Oh.
She moved back in with me, and I'm seeing a woman, and that's about it right now.
Tell me about the kids, their names. Who's the older?
My older is my son, Chuck, Charles Edward Goehring. He works for an insurance company in compensation. He's a claims adjuster supervisor, works down the South Street Seaport. I don't remember the name of the company. And my daughter graduated from Fairleigh Dickinson on an athletic scholarship. My son graduated from Concordia on an athletic scholarship. He played soccer. My daughter was a fencer for Brentwood School District. Became an all-everything in college, and is now working at ACLW, which is the mentally and physically handicapped adults. And she's a teacher there.
Wow, that's demanding. Wow. Emotionally and physically.
Very much. She's now trying to move on to something else. In fact, she has an application in to teach elementary school here. She's decided recently that she's put in 10 years with it, and it's a little bit difficult for her now.
Yeah.
So she's going to try and do something else.
Now, the grandchild that you mentioned, whose child is that?
My daughter's.
Okay.
My daughter's grandchild is, he's 2.5 years old, and lives with us.
Okay, all right. Yeah. What's his name?
Matthew.
And tell me about Matthew.
Matthew's I don't know where he gets it from. He's cute and intelligent, so it's probably not my side of the family. But he does an awful lot. Not. I would take a guess that he's average. Everybody talks much higher about their grandchildren.
Yeah, sure.
But I think probably because he from an early age was with other kids. He was put in a daycare because she worked, and there is no husband, there is no father.
Okay.
And a friend of ours from many years ago, of my daughter's best friend's mother, since she's known since birth, has been taking care of the baby 2 or 3 days a week, and the child care the other days. So he's always been with kids older. And he's learned quicker because of that.
Obviously, you get a chance to spend a lot of time with him if he's there with. I mean, he's living with you, so
yes,
that must be I can't speak from the point of view of being a grandfather yet. That's got to be a very wonderful experience.
Not when I heard about it, but
okay. Yes.
But it is now.
Yes.
I mean, you try and bring your kids up the right way and certain choices, and I think she made every intelligent choice around a mistake and made the right choices, and is doing a wonderful job now in bringing him up. I mean, just a very wonderful job. And of course, I do what I can.
Of course.
I would like it to be the way it's supposed to be. In other words, having her come over to visit with the grandchild and then going home. But he's always there, and there's always the child, and
Yeah.
until she gets on with the rest of her life.
I suspect that's down the road a piece.
Sure.
That's all.
Sure.
Are there, either in your son, your daughter, or now in the latest addition to the family at this point, even though he's very young, are there recognizable family traits that you can say, oh, I saw that in my grandfather or my uncle or that there are certain qualities or interests or personality, elements of personality that you recognize?
I would guess, the piano teacher has a child that plays the piano.
Yes.
I'm the athlete jock
Okay.
that had kids that were athlete jocks.
Okay.
My parents were not that way.
Ah.
Nobody in my family, well, I shouldn't say nobody. My older sister physically didn't do anything. She has a hard time clapping, coordination of two hands. My younger sister is the assistant athletic director at the University of
For
Richmond.
goodness sake, okay.
So maybe there's a gene for athletic director.
Yes,
Part.
yes.
But other than that, no, there really isn't. And it's a funny thing that way, too, because you would think so. And I haven't seen that,
Well,
in spite of it.
You've been the role model, then, to a great extent for the kids.
Yes, my parents died. They didn't get to see my parents very much.
Uh-huh.
They see a lot of, my first wife, you remember,
Yes.
Margie, she
Yes.
died many years ago.
Yes.
And they're still close with her parents.
I
There's
can
a
only
certain amount of that.
imagine how difficult that was for you during that period and after that. I can only imagine.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's a tough thing, of course, but I don't think that you're given any chores in life that you can't handle.
Okay.
And you go on to the next page and do that.
Speaking of life, where were you born, John?
I was born in Jamaica, Queens.
Mm-hmm.
Lived in Queens until I was 14. Moved out to Long Island, Amityville. Spent 4 years at Amityville. And then went to college in Kansas. Spent 4 years in Kansas. Came back. Got a job here at Brentwood. And I've been here. Different places I've lived, but I've been, it's been my job since 1965.
What are some of the earliest memories that you have growing up in Jamaica or as a child?
I probably remember some of the athletic things in grammar school. I lived in a community that was at one time considered somewhat upper class and went to public school 136.
Mm-hmm.
At some point, I remember there was a fire in a school nearby and they had to split up all of the kids in that school. And I don't even remember what school it was, but it was a school that was predominantly black.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the black kids were put into the predominantly white school. And that created a lot of problems because none of us knew how to handle it, whether it was the blacks or the whites.
Now, this was in what year, or when would this have been? About what time would this have been?
I graduated there. That had to be between 1956.
Okay.
No, up to 1956. I graduated high school in 60, but in 1954, 55, 56, in that time frame.
Well, sure, because the Supreme Court order to desegregate schools only happened in 54, so it was at that time.
And this wasn't a desegregation,
right,
because
right. But I'm saying the country was dealing with that too at that time. So
They're just starting to.
Just starting to.
Just starting to.
Right.
Yeah. But this was a fire, and I lived in St. Albans, which was right near Andrew Jackson High School.
Mm-hmm.
And 20 years later, I remember reading about Andrew Jackson having one white student in the entire school.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah.
So it was more of a physical place living than anything else.
What was your mother's full name? Her maiden name?
Matilda All. Actually, Johanna Matilda All.
Was she born in this country?
She was born in this country. Before she was a year old, she was in Germany.
Uh-huh.
And when she was 17, she came back into this country. She was a waitress. She was a housewife, part-time waitress.
Are you aware, Chuck, of some of your family history on your mother's side?
Not very much. Not very much. She had a brother and a sister, both living in Germany. They'd come once in a while and I'd see them, but she had the brother at one time escaped East Germany just before the wall went up. In fact, they used to tell stories in German, and
So they lived in East Germany before
Yes.
it was divided.
Yes, they did. Not my mother.
Right.
My mother lived in Bremerhaven,
Okay.
and she came over before any of this.
Right.
My uncle was in East Germany, and when it got real bad and everybody was trying to get out, he'd tell stories about being on the trains and without passports and riding on a bike and splitting up with his wife and getting back together later on. So they had a troubled time that way.
was a life-threatening situation too,
Yes.
to try to get out at that time.
Yes, it was.
Wow. How do you remember your mother when you were a child? What are your memories of your mom when she was?
She was the kind of mother that just doted over you, just took care of you.
Okay.
I mean, I was involved in a lot of different things like sports, and I don't think she might have gone to one basketball game, but that's because she was working and working during the time that I was playing.
Yeah.
And they didn't understand sports. They couldn't understand what it was that I was involved in sports. And when I got to go to college free, they had no idea that sports were ever that important in the first place.
Yeah.
And then to get a scholarship because of it, my mother and father just could not understand it. Great country.
Yes.
Great country.
I was going to say that you said before that she was a housewife or a homemaker, however you described her. But I wanted to ask, what did she like to do? How did she express herself? Did she love cooking, or did she like to sew, or did she have play cards, or what did she like to do that you remember?
Well, in the beginning, I didn't know because I was always out doing something.
Okay, sure.
And I didn't hang around my house too much. In fact, I know I got into trouble for missing meals and things like that.
Yes.
But she was a cook.
Okay.
In fact, my father and she owned a deli restaurant at one part
Okay.
in Hollis.
Uh-huh.
And it wasn't too long.
Those are long hours, though.
Yeah.
At a deli.
Yeah. She tells me about many times that I was in the carriage out in the backyard for 3-4 hours and they didn't even know whether I was there or not.
Oh, jeez.
So that's where my
Sometimes kids
personality comes from.
Sometimes kids today think that their parents are the only ones that didn't come to school competitions or school plays or whatever.
Yeah, I see life a lot different now.
Sure.
When we were in the city, Queens, and that,
Yes.
there were long hours of working. I see now when I come out to the island, when I was coaching out here many years ago, that there was a much greater influence of the parent coming to the games and being around. But we're back to square one
Yes.
because
Exactly right.
these parents are working,
Sure.
both of them working so many
They're
hours
struggling.
and not available.
Yes.
I hear some people say, "Oh, this kid's parents don't care. They're not around." It's not that. They may care in their own way, but they're busy.
Yes.
They're very busy.
What about your dad?
My
what
dad
did he
worked for
do?
the Herald Tribune,
Oh.
the Brooklyn Eagle first.
Yes.
He was a typesetter,
Uh-huh.
linotype operator, and then went to the Herald Tribune, retired, got a job with the Long Island Sun, if you can remember
I
that.
sure do.
And he just spent a lot of time working.
Yeah.
I mean, the physical work, he's out of the house a lot. And he always worked the lobster shift, what they call the lobster shift. He'd be at work at 5 o'clock at night, get home 2, 3 in the morning. So when I went to school, he was sound asleep.
Oh.
And when I'd get home from school, he was gone to go to work again. So I didn't see very much of my father at all.
Wow.
Weekends sometimes. And the weekends were well used. I mean, we went to Cunningham Park, or we went to
Yes.
Jones Beach, or or something like that with some of the other relatives. But I didn't see very much of my father.
What about your knowledge of his family history?
I know that he had a brother that died in the war, and I know that he had a sister that was probably our closest aunt. She lived in Brooklyn. I've been told that I met his mother, but she died when I was an infant, and I never met the father. I mean,
okay.
I'd never even heard
Yes.
stories about him.
Okay.
So I don't know very much about that side of the family at all.
Do you know anything about what occupations or lines of work that, let's say, your grandfather or others might have done
Don't
before?
even know. Don't even know. My father's father was dead long before I was even thought of. His mother didn't work.
Right.
She didn't have an occupation. She took care of the kids. I don't know from what funds or whatever there. My mother's father worked on a ship. He was a steward, ship steward.
Mm-hmm.
And I never met him because he was dead also before I was born. And my mother's mother lived with us. She never worked in a professional fashion,
Right.
but lived off his pension and stuff. We used to get checks from the German Social Security
I'll be done.
or type of Social
Right.
Security.
Right.
And that's what she lived on with us.
I ask questions about family history and background because, as we both are aware, that there's an enormous interest today. Many Americans are interested in finding, about their genealogy and
The coat of arms.
Coat of arms and the computers and so on. So,
I got a thing in the mail. It must have been 2 weeks ago to buy a book. I'm one of 239
there you go.
2,339 Goehrings in this country. Although we're probably not related, would I like a coat of arms for $64?
Yes, right.
Sure.
Okay. What are some of the earliest memories you have of your dad, of your father? You've answered probably some of that question. Is there anything else that you can think of?
No, I remember when I was real young and living in St. Albans, 6, 7, 8 years old, we'd go out in the backyard and stuff, and we had to be quiet because he was
sleeping.
just.
I wonder why they
sleeping.
called it a lobster shift. You mentioned that.
I don't know.
Shift. Yeah.
I don't even know.
Okay.
Now that you mentioned it,
Yeah.
I remember hearing it that it was the lobster shift.
Maybe that's what time lobster fishermen go out in the morning, or who knows, whatever it might be. You mentioned a sister before. Was yours a big family or a small family?
I had 2 sisters.
Mm-hmm.
I have an older sister, 7 years older than me,
Now, what's her name?
Joan Carroll.
Okay.
Benson,
Okay.
married into.
Mm-hmm.
She's an actress.
Oh.
She lives in Los Angeles, and she's not the most famous actress in the world, but she holds cards for this union and that union and gets different parts in different movies. And it's a good thing she doesn't need the money.
Okay. Yeah.
It's
a tough
more of a
life.
hobby than anything
All right,
else.
Sure.
She was a secretary. She was a Catherine Gibbs graduate and met her husband or met the guy that became her husband. And then they lived in Connecticut for a while and then moved to California.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't see her very much.
All right. Does she have children?
She has 3 children, 2 boys and a girl.
All right. They must
My
be grown up
nieces and
now
nephews.
too then.
Yes.
Uh-huh.
They were older than my kids.
And it's spread out all over the country, or are they
All over.
Yeah, all over.
Mexico, California, and Iowa.
Wow. Okay. Now you're the middle sibling, then. You're the
Yes.
You were next to me.
I'm the nice one.
You're the nice one. Okay. And what about you have a young sister?
I have a younger sister. She was the athlete also. She and I were in athletics all the time.
What's her name, Jeff?
Ruth.
Okay.
She never married. She lives in Richmond. She's, as I said, the assistant athletic director at Richmond University. She used to be at Colgate with the same title and moved to Richmond about 12, 14 years ago.
Let's see. You've answered quite a few of the questions that I was going to ask. Here's one. When you think back and growing up, What are some of the things that you can point to say that you learned this from your brother, or you learned this, I mean, from your sisters rather? You learned this from your sisters watching them. Is there anything that they've taught you that you can think of?
I don't think so.
Okay.
My older sister was 7 years older than I, so that she was always far away. In other words,
Yes. I
she
know what you
was
mean. Sure.
not around. She was,
Absolutely.
I mean, at night, of course, we're all in the same house,
Sure.
but she had a job by the time I knew what a job was.
Okay.
And I didn't get to see very much of her. Unfortunately, my little sister, if you asked her that question, she probably told you she learned a lot from me, and that's
I would imagine.
why she is where
Okay.
she is.
Okay.
But not vice versa.
Who were the adult influences outside of immediate family members, or outside of your mother or father, that might have affected your growing up or your life? Was there?
I don't know that too many adults did.
Okay.
I succumb
Mm-hmm.
to peer pressure. I was always with friends, always doing things, whatever hit us.
Okay.
And
And you were pretty much on your
troublesome.
own. But you had a lot of freedom.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my father was working, my mother was
Sure.
working. I had my grandmother at home, and she was, she couldn't get out to do anything, so I was gone.
Okay.
I was out an awful lot.
Okay.
If it wasn't sports, then at night I was at the pool room or something like that.
Here again is another way in which you could identify and feel for kids who are in a similar position today.
Absolutely.
And understand how things
Absolutely.
happen. Yeah.
There is no doubt about it. I had, you ask questions and I offer some more answers.
Sure.
Probably the telltale thing with me was, I don't know if you've seen the movie Rocky Marciano.
Yes.
Somebody Up There Likes
Yes.
Me.
Yes.
I got a feeling somebody up there liked me, because I decided to go to college when I realized I couldn't play sports anymore.
What influenced that decision? Who?
What
affected
happened
you?
was my guidance counselors in school were telling me to send in applications, do all these different things, and I wasn't doing that. And then somewhere along in the beginning of my senior year, I realized, well, I'm not going to play this sport anymore unless I go to college. And at the same time, I was very lucky. There were a couple of colleges contacting me. And that's what happened. They kind of like took over after I realized that I had to go on to college. And the thought of a job wasn't the thing. That I was not scared about getting a job or anything like that. What I was scared was that I would have to give up the thing that I liked. And the only way that I could continue playing the sport was in college. So college just became an extension of my high school.
Okay.
And when they said I could go relatively free, it just made it a lot easier for me. And once again, there wasn't any adult that got me to think that.
Yes.
It was just the self, realization.
Okay.
Um,
You arrived at that because of your experiences and because of
exactly.
life. And I suspect that while you were in college, you then made another decision to pursue education.
For all the wrong reasons.
Really?
The best decision in my whole life. I cannot impress upon you or anybody else that the decision that I made was the most gratifying. I think I've proven that I was good at it. I mean, I was a good teacher and dedicated. I gave time, everything. However, the way I became or got into education was a terrible thing that I don't even like to say. I was involved. I had to pick a major. So I'm sitting there taking business courses because
Something
I wanted
that
to,
every college student has to go through.
I wanted to wear a white shirt
Yes.
and tie and make a lot of money.
Okay.
Somebody told me that the only thing money couldn't buy was time. You could buy your health. People say you can't buy your health. Well, you can.
To a degree.
Yeah, I mean, if you're diseased, you can buy the best doctor to get over the disease or something
Maybe.
like that.
Yeah.
Well, you can buy the best doctor.
Okay, yes.
It may not get you over the disease.
right,
That's
yes. Okay.
understood. But my point is that the only thing that you really can't buy is time.
True.
You can't buy more time.
True.
The only thing you can do is make good use of the time you have.
True.
Somebody told me that teachers work 180 days, they're off 185.
Aha.
I said, what am I doing going into business?
Chuck, I'm glad you said there's a lot of people who think this.
I changed majors that week
Okay.
and went into education. Also, at the same time, realizing that if I wanted to stay with sports and a coaching, never the professional. I had a couple of professional contract offers later on, but at that particular time, never thinking that I was good enough to play professionally, I would like to get into phys ed, continue with athletics and coaching, and continue that way, and have 185 days off a year.
Yes.
And that's what made me get into it. And I'm ashamed of that thought, but not the end result. I am so proud of what I've done that I feel good about that, not the reason for doing it. Yeah. But the ends justify the means, so.
Well, in this instance, this is a wonderful story because I think the moral of this story is it doesn't matter. Many times it doesn't matter what your reason for choosing to do something, the fact that you did it, and good stuff happens.
Oh yeah, that's like I chose a college. The reason for me choosing a college was a terrible reason for the one that I chose. I was choosing between Concordia, Valparaiso, Wagner, C.W. Post, they wanted me to play lacrosse, and Bethany College in Kansas. And Bethany was the last one for my acceptance, and my father had turned into an alcoholic. And there was a lot of problems in the house, I just didn't want to be part of it.
Okay.
I chose Kansas and Bethany because it was the furthest one away. That was how I got out of my house the furthest. Yes. I could have gone to Wagner, I would have lived there, but I would have been home weekends or something like that.
Right.
I chose
you wanted out. You wanted to be away.
As far away from that house as I could get. And I did it. I mean, I went out to the middle of Kansas in August and brought to a town, because that's when football started, and brought to a town that didn't have a traffic light and had a lot of crickets.
Wow.
And I remember the first night laying there saying, what did I do? Holy mackerel. Yes. Turned out to be the best 4 years of my life.
Great. Wonderful.
Best 4 years of my life.
Chuck, when did you lose your parents? At what point did your parents pass away?
My father died when I was my mother and father wound up getting divorced.
I see.
After 39 years of marriage, they figured they couldn't make it any further. Okay. And he remarried pretty quick. He had sobered up and found God, probably fanatically. And I guess it was about early 70s, very early 70s. Now, in fact, it might have even been a little bit more than that. My wife died in 73. He might have died in 76, 77. He died of cancer.
Wow. And
he was in Florida at the time. And my mother outlived him. She had a couple of strokes, was in a nursing home. And I guess she died about 85, 84.
Right. That was a very rough period. Wow, you suffered a lot of losses, one right after another there. The family did, I should say.
There's an awful lot of people worse than that.
Yes.
I mean, that's...
Yeah. Some of your best friends, the people that you grew up with, do you retain any friendships from those early
Not
years?
from high school. I shouldn't say that. I dated a girl in high school. She was Judy cheerleader, and I was Joe athlete.
Okay.
And when we graduated, we went to the prom and everything. When we graduated, we went our own way. And after my wife died, I had found that her husband died.
Oh.
And for some freak of nature, I don't even remember what it was that got us together, but we started dating again. And it lasted for about 3 or 4 months, and then we got away from that. So I still see her once in a while because she teaches at Amityville.
Oh.
But other than that, no, not high school friends. That didn't last.
Going back a few years earlier, I meant to ask you this before. Do you remember the room where you slept when you were a kid?
High school, not in high school so much, but I remember it very well in grammar school.
Can you describe it? Can you describe the room?
Small, oblong window that had out to the street side. The door led out to a hall.
This is in Jamaica, is it?
This is in St. Albans.
In St. Albans, okay.
St. Albans. It was two-story house with a basement.
And your room was on what floor? Where was it?
Second floor.
Second floor. Okay.
And it had like I say, it was next to my parents' room, and they had a bigger room. I had the smallest one out of all of them. And the reason I could even tell you it faced the east, because I can remember one time, we didn't have any animals in the house. Not that we're anti-animal, but there was just nobody around to take care of them.
Take care of them, sure.
I remember waking up one time and there was a German Shepherd on my bed.
Oh, jeez.
And I had to be 6 or 7 at the time, and the memory is so vivid to me.
God.
I
Terrifying.
didn't move.
Oh.
I could imagine I was sweating or whatever. I didn't move. And as the sun came up and the light changed in my room, I realized it was the blanket and my imagination.
Oh.
And that's how I can remember the room.
Wow.
You know,
Wow.
the dog on the way to the window and just the lighting, dead serious.
Oh, wow.
But that, you know, I can remember the basement more so because that's where we played.
Okay, yeah.
You know, that had the old finished basements,
Yes.
you know, tile floor and paneling.
Yes.
And there was a bar down there which always came into our playing because Cowboys and Indians, we had to have a bar.
Yes.
And sure, that I can remember train sets down there and stuff like that.
As a kid, did you have, I recognize that your parents were working most of the time. Therefore, did you have chores to do, or were you responsible for doing certain things?
I probably did, and I probably didn't do them. You know, I mean, that's a rotten kid.
What was your first, oh, go ahead, finish.
No,
your
I'm
thought,
just
finish your
thinking. I don't know that there were any specific
Okay.
chores other than my mother saying to me, do this now or do that then.
Okay.
I didn't have any set chores to do every day.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
I didn't, not
All
that I can remember.
Do you remember your first paying job?
Yes.
What was that?
Newspaper boy.
Okay. What was the paper?
It was either the Long Island Press or Newsday.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was out on the island. Then I went to work for Hill's Supermarkets on Saturdays because I was involved in sports the rest of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember getting $8 for Saturday's work.
Mm-hmm.
And I had more money in my pocket than most of the kids in the neighborhood with that $8.
Was there a holiday during the course of the year, a family holiday that you remember as being a biggie, a lot of fun?
We had my father's sister, and we had some other people that were called aunt and uncle, but they were just good friends.
Yes.
And it was those 6 adults with all the kids that spent just about every holiday together. And then when my mother's brother came over, he had left East Berlin, East Germany, and stayed in West Germany for a while. And then my father sponsored him to come over, and he had kids. That was a big thing. Every holiday we were together.
Every holiday.
Every holiday. In fact, when I got older, I got into trouble because I didn't want to go to these holiday things. I wanted to do things with my friends or sports or whatever. And I would have to go, and that was like a punishment.
You bet.
But every holiday, it was different holidays at different relatives, and they all cooked. Everything was big, revolved around food and everything.
Sure.
And they were all fat.
Okay.
Every one of them. There wasn't a skinny relative that I had. Well, I was skinny, but that changed too.
Well, don't be too quick to say that. You're looking pretty good there, Mr. Goehring. I assume then from some of your previous answers that after school, you spent a good deal of your time doing things you enjoyed, like playing sports, or
Yes.
what were the sports that you were into in high school?
First it was football, basketball, and baseball. Then it became soccer, basketball, and lacrosse. And then in college, I went to a small school, and they said, you know, we kind of like use our money the best way possible. So they didn't give anybody any money to play one sport. You had to play 2 sports. So I was playing football and baseball. And it was at a time when there were actually 3 seasons in college. And it was a smaller school. It was not a Division I school. It was an NIAAA. And I asked to go out for basketball. And they said that I could if I had both coaches, football coach and the baseball coach, okaying it, because that's where my money was coming from. And they said, great, because that'll keep them in shape running the whole time. So I played football, basketball, and baseball in college, and had a couple of pro contract offers for football and baseball.
You must have some great memories associated with some of those games or some of those sports.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's probably the things, different games that stand out and different teams.
Tell me.
I don't know if I can remember specifically any events.
All right.
Not that they would be interesting. I mean, I can remember in a JV high school basketball game one time, it was tied at the end of that, and they decided to go into a sudden death, which we now call sudden victory over lawsuits.
Okay.
But and they ran a play for me, and I was supposed to get the ball, and I was going to score the winning points, and I was so well guarded, I didn't know what to do, and I just took this stupid shot from way out, and it went in.
Nice. Wonderful.
And I had everybody in the team happy we won and mad that I took that shot, because my chances of making that shot were so small. But things like that, I can remember. It's unimportant, as far as.
I don't know how unimportant.
Well, I mean, they're important to me.
Let's go to the videotape.
Well,
in my mind.
Yeah, if you could be that vivid on it, I can remember in a football game in college, receiving a punt. We played. This particular game was on a Saturday night, and it was snowing out, heavy snow. And I can remember getting hit a couple of times and getting spun around. All of a sudden, nobody was around me, and I didn't know which way to run because you couldn't see with the snow.
Yes. Oh.
Things like that I can remember. I can remember people I met through sports and have, since my name has been in a lot of directories as an athletic director, and I've gotten several awards for the athletic director's position. I got a call from Nebraska one time, and it was from a former player that were on the same team, and he's telling me about somebody coming to New York looking for a job, stuff like that. There's been some lasting things with that part. I can remember I hurt my knee in football, and I go to my senior year, missed the last 2 or 3 games. And go to the doctor. No, excuse me, it was during baseball, missed a few games. And going to the doctor, and he was tapping it, and he says, well, they're going to have to operate. And at that time, they didn't have any arthroscopic surgery. I was going to have a major knee operation. And the doctor saying that along the way, each visit I would have, and I'd get a tap 2 or 3 times a week. And he'd say, as soon as the swelling goes down, we're going to operate, because, we'll rebuild it, and you'll be able to have that tryout with the Chiefs, the Kansas City Chiefs. I had gotten some feelers. What I had gotten was a form letter sent to every senior that made anything. And the people, I went to a school in a very small town. Doctor heard that I got it, and everybody thought that I was getting a tryout with the Chiefs. I wasn't going to that. I was 165 pounds. I wasn't going to go to any professional football tryout. I wouldn't even watch a video of it. I'd get hurt.
Oh, jeez, yes.
So when I told him, I said, no, I'm not going to do that. He said, well, maybe then we don't need the operation. I never had the operation.
Damn, how about that?
So it's stuff like that, little odd things.
What was the first school you attended? You mentioned before that you went, where you went to school, and I think you even mentioned the name of the school.
I went to PS 136, Public School 136 in the city. It was in Queens. Well, it wasn't even Queens Village. It was St. Albans. And went there from kindergarten through 8th grade. My family moved to Amityville when I was in the 8th grade, but they didn't want me to switch schools just for a few months, so I lived with my aunt.
Wow, okay.
And took a bus.
Through the 8th grade?
Yeah. I finished up school in the 8th grade there, then came out to Amityville.
Wait, before you go to Amityville, have you got some best or worst memories from those years in school?
They were not good. Well, it was a wonderful time in life.
Yes.
But there were a lot of racial tensions
Okay, because
that
of the
were-
fire in the school, and yeah. Okay.
There were an awful lot of that going on in the city, period.
Yes.
I mean, there were
Yeah.
gangs and things like that. So, there's probably memories that I have, and some probably very good. But generally speaking, that was not my memory time.
Have you kept in touch, Chuck, with any of the teachers that you had,
No.
either in elementary or high school or college? Or
John, I'm 55 years old. Any of the teachers I had in elementary school are dead.
Okay.
They're all gone. No.
But who were your favorites, though? Who were your favorite teachers?
Of course, the phys ed teacher.
Yes.
He also coached the basketball team and softball. We had softball there, and we didn't have baseball at that time because it was all on the cement fields in the public schools. He was good. I had a music teacher that was a nice lady, very nice lady. I have some memories of them. I don't have too many memories of my high school teachers. I mean, my grammar school teachers. I have more so memories of my high school, because high school and college, that 8-year period, I don't know whether it was me or whether it was the time that the country was in, but it was great.
Yeah.
I mean, Greece was written about me.
Yes. Okay.
I mean, I lived it and just, went to see West Side Story and had memories of high school or grammar school with the gangs and things like that.
Those were good times.
But watched the movie Grease, and that was my everyday life.
Now, you told us before when you came to Brentwood, it was in
I started here in 1965, September of 65, when this building, the Sonderling building, opened.
now refresh my memory. Why was it that you came to Brentwood? Had you heard about an opening here? Or
This probably is a very good story. I took a year off college, and I worked for J.C. Penney, and I met a girl, Margie Brand.
Yes.
Her mother was Marge Brand, worked in the personnel office. And during that year, we got very close. Went back to my junior year, we were still very close, and it was getting serious. And I think we had accepted the fact that we were going to get married at some time. I got engaged, I think it was around Christmas of my senior year, and started looking for a job. But I was on the baseball team in college, and we were traveling. We went on Easter trip, and we were playing doubleheaders in every town we went to. We had an awful lot of games going on. And I had heard of, and I don't even remember where, maybe it was through Margie or whatever, I had heard of an opening in physical education and basketball coaching here at Brentwood, and I had put in an application. And I was given an interview during Easter vacation. So I left the team in Kansas City and flew back to New York and had an interview. My first part of the interview was with Mr. Kurlick, who was the principal of the R.O.B.S building at the time. I had to meet with Wade Cummings, who was the athletic director at the time, and had a very nice interview, and it was my first interview, and I thought I had done very well. And I went back to my fiance's house, and this was during April. And we're just sitting around. I can remember sitting around the kitchen, and Mrs. Brand, who was Dr. Hoyt, not Dr. Hoyt, pupil personnel at the time. She was the secretary, and there she came back, and we were just sitting around talking in the late afternoon. She said, "What position was it?" And I said, "Physical education and possible basketball coaching." She said, "Oh, I sent a contract to a Mr. Stan Kellner for this position about a month ago. That position isn't open."
Oh, jeez.
I said, "I just came from Now, also, you have to understand, I'm mellow now, but you're in college, you're a senior, you're an athlete. I was a big extrovert, and I was the toughest person I knew. And if you remember Wade Cummings, he was a little guy.
Yes.
I called him up from her house. I called him every name in the book. Up and down, every name in the book, that I wasted my parents' money to fly. And, money was not easy then. I had gone through all this, left the baseball team, and that he was really, in no uncertain terms, not a nice person for doing this. he took it all.
Yes.
He took everything because he knew that he was wrong. And he took it all, and I hung up on him. The next day I took a plane back, caught the team wherever it was in whatever, finished the vacation, finished college, I had applications all over the place. And one day, as we're preparing for the wedding, which was going to take place a couple of weeks later, Mrs. Brand came home, and she said there was an opening in driver education at Brentwood. I said, oh, I could teach driver education. She said, there's a guy named Pat McMahon that was in charge of it. Pat McMahon was my JV coach at Amityville
Oh, for goodness
when
sake.
I was there.
Wow. Yeah.
So I said, I got this.
Okay.
I
All
call
right.
up Pat McMahon. Pat says, Chuck, you got it. It's your job.
Fabulous.
He says, we don't have to have an interview.
Okay.
All you have to do is meet this guy, Wade Cummings, and have an interview with him. This is true.
Yes.
Because I don't know if you remember back that far, we had HPS, Health, Physical Education, and Safety.
Yes. Okay.
Health, backed up with phys ed your junior year, backed up with safety and driver education your senior year. So in one time spot over a 2-year period, you got all 3 subjects. And you didn't have to worry about study halls or anything. It just, they had it fit there. HPS came under Wade Cummings. So I tell Pat, okay, and I hang up and I said, I can't do this. I said, why? Why can't I? I called up Wade Cummings, and I before I even I happened to get him on the phone. I said, do you remember that guy who told you off, did all this kind of stuff a few months ago? Yeah. Well, it's me. Would you like to give me an interview for the driver ed position? And it was like, not good. I mean, in my head. But he said, come on in. It went fine. I got the job.
Yeah.
He told me at the time that I forget who the man was in charge. It was assistant superintendent or something that was running this program. And he said, go through with the interview. We need people, and we can keep an index of people. And
Okay.
I was just not supposed to do the part where I called up Wade and told him off and
Yes.
everything.
Yes.
Now, the story gets a little bit further.
Okay.
25 years later, I become the athletic director at Brentwood. Mike Tully becomes a coordinator of physical education and health.
Yes.
He was the wrestling coach at the time. You have to give that up. Bill Land was the athletic director, and he puts out a posting on the position of wrestling coach. Wade Cummings used to be the wrestling coach. Wade Cummings was going to retire soon, and I guess he was going to try and bring up his final 5 years, and he applied for the wrestling position.
Mm-hmm.
Bill told me I could do the interviews. I didn't tell Bill. I didn't tell Tully. They were all sitting there during the interview. And I said, at one point, I said to Wade during the interview, Wade, do you remember years ago when we met? He said, vaguely. I said, do you remember when you had an interview with me for a basketball position? He said, oh, yeah, I remember that. I remember that. I said, do you remember that I didn't get the job? He said, you didn't? I said, guess what? If you think for 1 minute you're getting this position, forget it. And he kind of like looked at me and said, I'm only kidding. And I had to explain to the other two guys what this was all about.
Yeah, so that's great. That's a great story. That is.
That's true, too.
What do you remember of Brentwood when you arrived here? You looked around and you saw the town and you saw the system. And what do you remember some of your early
So many
impressions?
things were going on in my life then because I had just gotten married, just starting out a career. I had just not taken 2 professional baseball contracts.
Okay.
I was working, if you remember what we were getting paid at that time,
Wow,
I was working other
one of
jobs
the-
along
yes,
with it.
Absolutely. We'll get to
I
that.
don't
in a minute.
remember a lot in the very beginning.
Okay.
I remember there were a lot of new teachers. Brentwood was growing
right.
leaps and bounds. And that particular year, from what I understand,
What year is it?
1965
Okay.
was
yeah.
the biggest year of hiring
Okay.
in the district's history.
Uh-huh.
We had an awful lot of teachers.
Was that Fred Weaver?
Fred Weaver was principal.
Mhm.
Fred Weaver was there. So that there aren't a lot of things that I can tell you about. What I do remember, During the summer, they found out, they signed me to a contract for driver ed, and then they found out that I didn't have the driver ed course. Nobody ever checked my certification. I didn't.
Oh, yes.
I thought
Okay.
driver
All
ed were people, you know, you teach your daughter how to drive.
That's right.
I thought
Sure.
that's what driver ed in high school was.
All right.
Turns out you had to be certified, have a teaching certificate, and the course.
Yes.
Well, I had it all except the course.
Yes.
So that summer I went to NYU. Brentwood found the course for me.
Okay.
They sent me to NYU and I got the course. I was teaching driver education, teaching one period of health. Dick Roth was coming over to teach one period of driver ed. We switched
Okay.
just for
Yes.
certification purposes. We were teaching each other's subject. I remember just getting totally involved. I mean,
Yeah,
this
sure.
was something that I could do. I really could do this teaching
All of a
thing.
sudden, it all came together now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I was chaperoning anything and everything, not only for the finances, but
Yes.
because I was going to be there anyway.
Yes.
I remember teen nights, being in the pool.
Yeah.
I was a lifeguard at one point in my life.
Where did you lifeguard?
It was at a day camp.
Okay.
I ran the swimming program at
Uh-huh.
a day camp.
Okay.
But my lifeguard certification, WSI and life saving and everything, was long gone.
All right. Yeah.
But I didn't know it.
Oh.
I didn't realize it. I didn't know there were dates on it. That's how young I was and
Yes.
immature.
Yes.
I remember being in charge of the pool for all those times. And if anything would have ever happened,
Oh God. Oh,
the district.
dear.
But
Yes.
but those were the way things went.
That's exactly right.
So many things were going on, and we
Sure. It
didn't
was so
have
fast.
people
Yeah.
that whoever could would. But that was also at a time when whoever could would because they wanted to.
Yes. Absolutely.
I mean, when I took over the athletic director's job and I tried to get chaperones, people didn't want any part of it. I couldn't get teachers to go in and chaperone an event.
That's right. Yeah.
They wanted no part of it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I can remember during the years, teachers would beat the buses out
That's right.
of the parking lot. That was not the case in '65 in the late '60s. We were also growing so big. We had fantastic teams here.
Sure.
We were involved in so many things, and kids were involved too. And there was no fear. I mean, kids would come to a football game. You couldn't get a spot along the fence if you didn't get there early. You were too deep standing, never mind the stands.
Yes.
So there weren't a lot of things. I can look back in the yearbooks and know, because I kind of like saved all the yearbooks, and know the involvement that was going on and the fun that it was and the respect that was there.
Yeah.
I got talked into, remember R.O.B.S Luncheonette?
Yes.
Okay. Joe Campo and I played for R.O.B.S Luncheonette. Well, first it was Sylvia's Beauty Salon, and then I got pulled from that team over to R.O.B.S Luncheonette. R.O.B.S Luncheonette was the unofficial mayor, was Gus Rodriguez. He was the mayor of the town.
That's right.
And he worked there.
He eventually went back to Puerto Rico. He was one of those that went back.
Could be. He
Yes.
came back here again.
He did?
Yeah, he
Oh, I
came
didn't
back
know
here.
that.
Oh, I saw him. I don't even know if he's alive now.
Okay, yes.
But yes, he went back to Puerto Rico when R.O.B.S went down.
Yes.
And then came back
Oh, I
after
didn't see-
4
I
or
didn't
5
know
years.
that. Oh, that's great.
But I can remember going in there with the kids and being around there and the involvement and knowing all the kids and the total respect. I played for R.O.B.S Luncheonette. They'd have a dinner dance, the whole league, afterwards. And I would go in there with my wife. Every man at the table stood up and took the seat out for her, and Mr. Goehring. These are the guys I played ball with.
Yes.
It was Mr. Goehring. No, it's Chuck. No, it's Mr. Goehring. Because I was a teacher.
Yes.
And that was the main thing, the way that it was looked at.
Yeah.
I can remember stuff like that and the kids in the school at that particular time too. It was a good time to be at Brentwood.
In that sense, I want to say something about back then. I can remember that Brentwood was always perceived as being sort of like a microcosm of this country, and that whatever happened in Brentwood would eventually happen elsewhere. That we were on the
There's
cutting
the
edge.
sociologist coming out, huh?
Yeah, yeah. No, it was like this is a microcosm of the whole country. We have Brentwood as a community recruited people from South America and Latin America to come to live here. It wasn't a case of that we were invaded. We invited. And then the school system, had to deal with all of the changes in the the cultures that came in and so on. But whatever it was that happened in Brentwood, whether it was in athletics, whether it was in the music department, whether it was in the classroom, it eventually, you saw it in other parts of the country. It was
That could very well be. I'm looking back at the times, and probably if I could fault the system and what was going on, we were probably growing too fast. In other words, we did things out of need rather than research
absolutely
and find the best possible,
yes.
because it was a year too late that we built the classroom that we needed, or whatever it was.
A crisis mentality, always.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And it was because we were going too fast.
Well, was
now,
that at the
Sachem
time,
later on.
Was that at the time of the triple sessions with the overlap and the
the
morning?
6x6.
Yeah.
Oh, expert on that. It was right before that.
Right before.
I mean, we were forced into that.
Yes.
Had we know maybe what we know now and could deal with numbers ahead of time,
Yeah. Planning.
we might have planned another school or whatever to
Early.
get over that before we were forced into it. I don't think that those that were in power at the time were able to plan ahead, because nobody knew how bad and how great the numbers would become.
Well, those are the years at 23,000 students in the district. We were the largest on Long Island, and sixth largest in the state, as I recall.
Well, without the city schools, we were the number one.
We were.
Oh yeah, in rural areas, we're number two now.
Really?
And I know that because I get a listing of all athletic teams going to high schools. Now, for instance, Rochester, but that's a city, is larger.
Yes.
New York City is larger. But Sachem's number one, Brentwood's number two.
Doesn't
right
that
now.
work to the advantage of the athletic of teams and of the luck of, I mean, the draw, the talent that's there?
It did
Cool.
at one time. Yes. Yes and no. I'll probably answer it better that way. Because many years ago, when we were that big, we also had a different goal in mind. Society did at Brentwood.
Mm-hmm.
Parents were telling their kids, get involved in everything. You take
Okay.
part in this. You be there. You do this.
Yes,
Because school was the most important thing.
that's right.
We now have kids that have to work. And the parents are the ones telling them, go work. The value system has changed.
Okay.
Sometimes it's more important for a kid to have a $500 gold chain on his neck than it is to go out for the football team.
I see.
That was not the case
Not at all.
in the early 70s, late 60s.
Not at all.
If you go over to another large district like Sachem,
Yeah, you started to mention that, right?
Sachem, when they were growing, they knew how to grow because they've seen Brentwood do it, or they've seen somebody else do it. Longwood now growing, doing the same thing. They have the experience, and different facets of the growing has become written up, if you will.
Yes.
They're better able to handle it. And the value system that they're dealing with now is different than the one that we had at that time. We had kids involved in everything. I mean, there were just as many kids here after school as there were during school at certain times. We had a very huge problem when we went on split session with sports.
Oh.
Incredible. I mean,
Well, scheduling you're talking about.
yeah,
Scheduling,
and
yeah.
facilities.
Okay. Oh.
Because how does the basketball team practice in the gym?
Oh,
There are classes in the gym.
Yes. Yes.
How does the baseball team go out because there are phys ed classes out there?
Yes.
Where do you get the coach from? Coach is teaching at that time. It was, I think that if I was the athletic director at the time, I would have needed 16 helpers to figure it out. I don't know who made those decisions or where they came from, but boy, they did some job.
Has there been pressure over the years, Chuck, and I honestly don't know the answer to this, has there been pressure to de-emphasize the importance of physical education, or have you seen any of that?
Sure.
I look at the size of Americans today, and I wonder if there's a correlation between
I don't know if
exercise and...
there is a larger emphasis now than ever before on being physically fit.
Yeah. Yes.
People belong to racquetball clubs,
Right.
to gymnasiums,
Right, exactly.
to do all of this.
Right.
The emphasis is there. We are just coming out of a period of time when
That's what I thought.
finances were the governing body.
Yes.
Middle Village eliminating all their elementary phys ed teachers because it's not required by law
Okay. Yeah.
was not a good thing, but it was a needed thing to them. They saved money and just said, big deal. They're back. They're bringing those people back. That the need for it has changed. Not the law.
Okay.
The
Okay.
school district could still do it.
Right.
But the need to have the people in, because of the carryover effect, is so great now with health and physical education that it's very, very important. So I don't think there's a de-emphasis now.
Not now, but I wondered
There
if there
was,
was. Yeah.
but it was for financial
Okay.
reasons,
All
not for anything else.
Yeah, we live in a different economic climate today anyway.
That's right.
Some of the characters that you've worked with, I know that you have worked with some very interesting people, particularly in the beginning, some of the people.
Maybe we shouldn't go there.
Okay. Okay, sure.
There are some guys
Some lovable characters.
I could
absolutely.
mention the name and
Yes.
you and I would get a giggle out of
Okay.
it, you know.
Yes. Okay.
I could tell you some of the stories I wouldn't tell you, but
Yes.
you know, there's some real
Okay.
characters. I mean, Reggie Poquette was a wonderful, wonderful
He
man.
sure was.
But I don't know if Brentwood ever had a character.
Yeah.
This
This was
is-
when Brentwood was rural. I mean, and Reggie was
lived
a
through it.
rural- Yes.
He lived through it. Reggie Poquette was 5-hour ride from here, breaks his leg walking down a mountain. Broke it. Got himself, crawled to the car, got himself into the car, drove all the way back to Long Island so he could go to the Veterans Hospital in Northport, where his brother worked or something, and get free x-rays. A broken leg.
Yes. Yes. Oh my God. Yes.
You know what it was? He was picking apples. He got the bushel of apples in there also. I'm not talking about a thing where you wonder whether it was broken.
Yes.
He splinted it.
Oh man. Oh man. Oh,
It was
man.
broken.
Oh, yes.
And there are...
I knew Reggie in my early years of teaching, and definitely one of the all-time lovable characters, as there were many others. And the school picnics, the end of the year picnic that he was always involved in.
I was involved in that a lot.
Yeah.
I ran all the games for
Yes.
years and years.
What a great memory that is. My kids growing up going to I missed it when it was no longer there. It would
That's
become
right.
an institution.
And they've tried to bring it back every once in a while, and they just can't.
Yeah. Yeah.
It just
Well,
doesn't have the same meaning
climate.
anymore.
No, it was a family. We
Jim
were a
Sabatel cooking,
Yes. Yeah.
Matt Fay.
Matt Fay.
Fay buying all the stuff from his local deli.
Yeah. Yeah. That was we were an extended family, and the feeling was
We were all
one
growing
of-
up together. We all
Oh,
started
I know,
young.
I know.
Everybody had the exact same problem as the other person.
And
We were all young. We all had kids. We all worked
I
other
hope
jobs.
the generation of teachers and the young administrators that are coming along now are going to have that part of the enjoyment that we had of being together and watching one another mature and watching.
Do you know
one
that
another
we had role models and they didn't?
How do you mean
I
that?
shouldn't say that they didn't. I'm not going to mention his name. I brought a coach in for something that he did, and it wasn't a huge problem, but it wasn't the right thing. And he came back the next day after we did the chastising and everything and the writing up. He came back the next day and he said, "This is off the record." I said, "Okay." He said, "I want you to understand, you had a Bob Hoppe. Who do I have?"
Ooh, wow.
And he was right. We had Roy Rapp, Bob Hoppe, that had been here for 10 years or so. We could model ourselves after him. At my retirement dinner, I did one of these, I remember such and
Yes.
such.
Okay.
And one of the things I
Did
remember...
anybody videotape your retirement? dinner?
Yeah, I have the videotapes. It's
Good.
really nice. I had, in fact, the Booster Club paid for it professionally to have it done.
Oh,
It
wonderful.
was my gift.
Great.
But I remember cafeteria duty in the Ross building. And if you remember, there's two different cafeterias
Yes.
with the kitchen in
Sure.
between. Bob Hoppy was at one, I was at the other. Now, I saw all the cafeteria duty people, they just let the kids go to their locker
Yes.
whenever. It
Yeah.
wasn't a big deal.
Yeah.
Bob Hoppy came over in his cafeteria, nobody left.
Yeah.
And he walked over to me. This must have been like the second week I was teaching. And he said, cafeteria duty is not the important thing. But if you let your kids out and they're in the hall, the teachers can't teach the important things.
Okay.
Now, I even said this at the dinner. Bob Hoppy, who was the lacrosse coach, who was the phys ed teacher, who was respected by everybody in the world, told me this. It has to be the truth.
Yeah.
I ran the best cafeteria next to Bob Hoppy than
Okay.
anybody. So we had those role models. We had the people that were willing on our level to help us out.
Yeah. That's a mentor.
That's not there anymore.
Right.
I shouldn't say it's not there, because it is there.
Yeah.
But it's a cycle. It's just coming back. There was a period of time when I would not get out in the parking lot when the bell rang, because there was too much traffic of teachers racing out. You could get hurt.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now it's not that way. We have the young teachers in here that really want to be there. The coaches, we call them the brat pack. These guys are willing to give up their time,
You
their
have
efforts.
but you've got a wonderful a pool of people to deal
That's
with
what I'm
today.
talking about. Absolutely.
You got the cream of the
Absolutely.
crop. Whoever you hire has got to be the creme de la creme today.
Yeah.
And they have
Because
to
there's
get
12
that
people
message.
for every
That's
position.
right. And they have to know that they're good.
Yeah.
Well,
I agree.
what about the training that you got for what you eventually did here in Brentwood down at Kansas? Did you think that it prepared you for what you faced when you got here?
I'm going to take a guess that academically it did.
Okay. Yeah.
I mean, I could look at
Could
a book,
anything
make
prepare you, I guess? That's the other part of that. Could anyone have prepared you?
the things that came up that were problems were not things that could be prepared for. I don't know. Have you taken administrative courses? You have the in basket.
No.
They have, you sit in a classroom and you pull an item out of the in basket. And the whole class discusses on how to handle
Okay.
it. Here's a problem, here's a problem, here's a problem. What are you going to do about
Yes.
it?
Okay.
And then, of course, it goes back, well, you can't do this because of the law, you can't do that. And it goes back and forth. We didn't have that in undergraduate work. And when I was doing it in graduate work, I thought it was just a waste of time. But I can remember some things that happened when I first started teaching that it wasn't any preparation that made me able to handle it. It was my life experience up to that point.
Okay.
And
yes.
I'll give you an example. I had said before when I was dealing with Wade Cummings at one time that I was a tough guy off the football field out of college, and I knew it all and I could tell him off because I wasn't scared or anything. Well, that was true when I first started teaching. And I can remember a class where I had a kid in the back that kept on falling asleep, just kept on falling asleep. All I could think of was, is this kid stupid?
Okay.
I'm one of the best teachers known to man,
Yes.
and he's falling asleep in
Yes.
my class?
Yes. Yeah.
And I would say, come on, I don't even remember his name.
Yeah.
Wake him up or something. And I'd put up with it too much, kept the kid in after and had to talk with him. And I was going to, this kid would be, minced meat was in my head. I had found out through the conversation with him, and this also is a true story. His mother used to hang around a bar in town. I won't even tell you the bar.
Yes.
Bring a different guy home every night.
Okay.
The father was gone. A couple of the guys that she brought home, of course they were drunk, would beat her up.
Jeez.
He got tired of that and simply moved out. There was a Hills supermarket
Yes.
in the where the Brentwood Theater is. The kids slept in a cardboard box behind that Hills supermarket. And I'm worried about this. The kid hadn't taken a shower in I don't know how long.
Okay.
I'm worried about the kid falling asleep in my class.
Yes. Yes.
What a life's lesson to learn.
Yeah.
And I guess that's one of those things like Bob Hoppy telling me to take care of the cafeteria.
Sure.
It's just something, no, you don't go to school and get prepared for something like that.
No.
It's just the way that you deal with it that teaches you along the way to handle stuff like that.
Chuck, do you have contact with any of your former students or
Many.
the people? You do? Yeah.
Many.
Yeah, great.
Many. I had, and I don't want to toot my horn.
Toot
I
away.
I was at my dinner. Tammy DeRose came back. Tammy DeRose was probably the best female athlete that ever graduated from Brentwood.
Wow.
And I knew at the time when she was playing for me that she had some problems. I didn't know what they were. I never made it a point to get into the kids' problems as much as if they came to me, then I would try and do something.
Sure.
And that happened often. A coach gets that. She was at the party. She had a great time. Everything was fine. She wrote me a letter the next week and said that I was the most important male in her life because her father was splitting up with her mother and was just gone at the time. They had no money. She couldn't go to the prom because they had no money. She didn't have any. She made the All Long Island as the Daily News picked them. She made that team, and I remember she had asked me if I would take her to a Met game because Daily News did that. She wrote in this letter how much that meant to her when she had no male in her life, relatives or anything. And all of this coming out after the fact, I knew that I was important to her during the time. I knew that she had relied on me and she'd come into my room with this problem, that problem. The extent to which this girl bears her, she's married now.
Yes.
And she's, I think it's Garden City, like the assistant athletic director, by the way.
Wow.
And wrote to me this letter on how important I was in her life when she needed it. Had I not been around, she wonders where she would be. There have been several cases like that.
I think this
but I didn't know it at the time.
No, of course
You just do what you think
and
is right.
sometimes the people who have spent time in the classroom never learn it, they never hear about it, but they've done it. I mean, it's affected some people more than others, obviously.
Well, I think a coach gets closer to the kids in a non-threatening situation. It's more of a social thing.
Yes.
So that there's an awful lot of teachers that never experience this.
Okay.
Because the bell rings and the kids are gone.
That's right.
Especially somebody who doesn't get involved in an extracurricular activity. Like you have a science teacher that may help out with the play. Well, he'll get close to those kids. He'll experience some of that.
Yeah.
Somebody who may be the senior class advisor. Yeah. I remember they dedicated the yearbook to me in 1973.
Great.
And the kids, I still get letters from them.
Right.
I got a letter that I keep in that yearbook from the mother of one of the kids that was really big in that class.
Wonderful. Yeah.
And but there's so much more to teaching than just the academics.
Oh, sure.
I would trade all the academics and just do the other part if I had to pick one or the other.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The other is more meaningful.
Yeah.
I mean, you can buy a calculator. You can't buy a friend.
Yeah. Do you maintain social contacts with former colleagues that are now retired or that have you
very much so.
Yeah.
I would take a guess that if
do you play golf? Are you a golfer?
Yes.
Oh, so I'll bet that's a place where it comes together sometimes.
Out of my 3 or 4 best friends, 2 or 3 are retired. Frank Morrow, Mike Welsh. I mean, they were trying to get me for the past couple of years to take my vacation days to ski with them or to play golf with them. And I would have to, I still work.
Yes.
I can't do that. But now I can.
That's right. But you were a member of BTA for a good number of years, and then you became an administrator, and you became a member of BIPSO. Were you an active member of either of those organizations?
No, I wasn't. No, I was not an active member.
Okay.
And I don't think you'll find many coaches that do
because there isn't the time. They just can't.
Absolutely
can't do
no
it.
time.
Yeah. Was there a time that I will say an organization became helpful to you or your family? or were they there for you at a particular time when?
I've never really had to have them.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I mean, people were. As you're aware, I'm sure I've had a few tragedies. My wife, my son dying, and things like that.
Right.
The people were there.
Okay.
They may even have represented or began by representing certain organizations, but it was the people and not the organizations that were my rock of Gibraltar.
Yes.
So I've not had the need for it.
Good. You're fortunate then in
Yes.
that respect.
Absolutely.
Were there people, though, that were active that you admired? People who were active in BIPSO, people who were active in BTA that you had an association with that you admired?
Yes. I think if there's a beginning of your career where there are people that influence you,
Mm-hmm.
I think that Guy DiPietro and Dave Martz,
Mm-hmm.
through the BTA,
Mm-hmm.
I looked up to them. I admired what they were doing.
Yes.
Because that was also the formulative years of the BTA.
Absolutely was.
And to have the president of the BTA come into
Yes, exactly.
the
right.
teacher's lounge and tell you about a contract,
Yes.
and then pull a slide rule out and tell you exactly what your percentage increase is,
Yes.
that impressed me.
You bet.
And to know what he went through. The first years of austerity, I was president of Coaches Association many years ago. Guy DiPietro, when the vote would come in, would grab me right away and go into his office. And one time, he simply wrote me out $1,000 check right there and said, "We got to have athletics. Here's my contribution to get it started."
Wow.
And there were situations like that where I would say, wow, this guy doesn't have to do that.
Wow.
He really doesn't have to do
Yes.
that. So there were people that I did admire that way. Yeah. Not for the $1,000, but for the gesture.
Is there one thing that you can point to, Chuck, and say that you are most proud of that, or are there
You mean that I've done accomplishments?
a professional
I've
accomplishment?
been very fortunate. I've been in situations where the position I was in warranted certain things for taking place. For instance, Bill Lamb was the athletic director before me. He had to reorganize the entire high school athletic program. I couldn't have done what he did.
Mm.
He was really good at it. He did a fantastic job. And when I took over, it was just a matter of continuing his. He
okay.
had done the work.
Yeah.
I got hit with all the austerities. I've been the athletic director for 9 years, and we've been on austerity for 7 of those.
Jeez.
I think my accomplishment and that which the coaches have said, and Bill Lown has said, Bill Lown has come back and in my office told me he didn't think that he could do what I did in order to get the athletic program through.
Right.
I feel that that's probably my biggest accomplishment. And don't ask me how I did it, because some of the things were illegal, and I don't want to. But that, and the fact that because of that, I got involved on a state level, and the law was changed. And probably when a law changes, there are hundreds, sometimes thousands of people that have caused it to change.
Okay.
In this particular case, after 4 to 5 years being involved in getting the law changed, if the state were to pick 10 people outside of legislators, I might be one of those 10 that have done the most to get that changed.
Wonderful.
I feel very, very
proud of
good
that.
about
Yeah,
that.
Great.
Very
great,
good about that.
Great. You mentioned before, or you alluded before to the fact that the salaries of teachers. When you began, you remember what you made the first year?
$4,800.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's what it was.
Yeah.
Might have been $5,800.
Before taxes.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. Somebody asked me, why was I teaching I made more money in Hills over the summer.
Yeah.
I was a produce manager for Hills. They made more.
And then, of course, there were the part-time jobs. There were the second jobs and third jobs and
jobs,
fourth
right.
jobs and whatever, the coaching and the assignments.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was probably what made some of it so good too, because you were very busy and had a different goal in mind.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, I'm going to retire on more money than I ever thought I would make in my life.
Yeah. And you didn't work any harder this week than you did your first week on the job, even though the nature of the job is different.
Oh,
But
no,
you worked just as hard.
No, because that's
Same
it
amount
was
of
a
hours,
joy.
probably. Sure.
Yeah, it was a joy.
Right.
Exactly. You're right. You're right. And that's not to put a medal on my chest, because so did everybody else.
No, I understand that. It's just the way. I think for people who say, "Wow, look what they're making today. Look what they work just as hard all those." This is catch-up time. That's what it is. Now you're going to retire. You retire effectively this year. When is the actual date of retirement?
June 30 is the last day I work here.
All right.
July 1, I'm unemployed.
Are you finished totally, or will you continue to work in some capacity with the district, or what's
With the district, I'm pretty much finished.
Okay.
I'm involved on the county level and the state level.
so
For
it's-
Section 11, which is Suffolk County Athletics. I'm the chairman for girls soccer and the chairman for boys and girls fencing.
Oh, okay.
And I'm the chairman for what is called play days for the handicapped or challenged.
Okay.
I will stay in that capacity. I'm the state chairman for girls soccer. I'm the coordinator of girls soccer for the state of New York.
Wow.
I will stay in that capacity because I enjoy those and will have time for it. I mean, I'm not I don't have any plans for retirement.
Yeah.
Other than straightening out my drive on the golf course.
Okay. All right. That sounds like a plan to me.
If something else came along, I'd probably work. I'm not against working. I'm young.
You going to miss anything that you've identified so far?
Everything we talked about.
Yes. Yes.
There's no doubt.
And Chuck, what do you know at this point you're not going to miss?
I'm not going to miss austerity, but that's
Yes.
gone.
Yes. Okay.
There probably are some people that I won't miss,
Okay.
but I'd never say who they were or anything like that.
Yeah.
But I probably won't miss them.
Oh, I'm sure that's the case, just as that there will be people who you will miss. They're, you know,
Oh,
yeah.
I'm going to miss 99% of them,
Yes.
and I'm not going to be gone.
Yeah.
I had a conversation today with one of the coaches and a problem he had, and I said, you know where I live?
Yes. Okay. Great.
I mean, I don't care to give up on that.
What is there anything that you would like to have accomplished that time did not allow, or that
No.
circumstances didn't allow?
No,
What a great thing to be able to say.
no.
Chuck.
I mean,
Man.
the job, I don't think that you know what the challenge is. What I thought, when I took over the athletic director's job, I thought the challenge was the junior high program.
Uh-huh.
It quickly became austerity and just keeping the programs going. And the things involved with that. I mean, raising all those funds was just an immense task. I did that. I accomplished it. In fact, I think when a person retires, and maybe you know it better than I do, there are probably 8 or 10 reasons that you finally say yes to retirement. One of the reasons I said I would retire, that I was going to make the decision for myself, was I didn't want to ride out the next 2 or 3 years, because in my head I would have then been a lame duck.
Okay.
I mean, if my challenge was austerity, and austerity is gone, and we have a budget and the program's in good shape,
Okay. Yeah.
and I can retire, why not?
Okay. Sure.
I could very easily have continued and just made the program go with no big renovation
Yeah.
or goal. And there probably are a lot of little things. But it's the right time. If Mike Tully comes in, maybe his challenge will be the junior highs. Maybe he can take that. I wouldn't be here long enough to take on any long-range goals, so it's time for another person to take over. I feel really good. I feel tremendous about what I have accomplished. And, you know, I'm not talking about putting a plaque on the wall as much as, boy, I can leave with a very good feeling.
Good feeling. That sounds like the right time.
And I think it's just a matter of you being in the right place at the right time. I wasn't born to get us through austerity. I happened to be there, and I happened to have, you know, the people that helped me and got it done.
Does all of this give you some perspective on what you see ahead in the immediate future for public schools, as Brentwood being a part of that whole change?
There's I mean, in a philosophical sense, there's probably a whole new dimension that's coming out on funding of public education. I think that the emphasis has to change on not on what we're doing, but the product we're putting out.
Okay.
I don't think, I mean, if we have 1,000 kids graduating, we're putting a large piece into the workforce. And it's not as important, from what I understand, talking with people that hire our coaches, or hire our athletes and that. It's not important that they have the science background as much as the math background, as much as, is it their value to show up to work on time? Or is it their value that they will come in an hour late and just, hey, my alarm didn't go off?
You're talking about a work ethic and people skills, or
I think the evolution is coming, and I've read this too. The evolution is coming that's what we have to prepare.
So you think this will have an impact on the students, for example, of Brentwood down the road?
I don't think that there's a way that
they can avoid it.
No.
Yeah. Okay. Sure.
And that comes from a lot of different sources.
Sure.
That not only comes from the classroom and the discipline involved, comes from the family and the discipline, comes from the team and the discipline. And I don't know how many times I could tell you, parents calling up, my kid got thrown off the football team because of this, that, or the other thing. Well, that's the rule. Yeah, but he's still on the school play, and they don't do this to him at school. Well,
Andy Goehring.
Andy Goehring.
His name just popped into my mind as we're drawing near the end of our time together, and I thought, I haven't talked about Andy to anybody, and it just occurred to me you had to know Andy.
I know him very well. I saw him a couple of months ago.
Did you really?
I see him at conferences. He works for...
There's another guy that you keep in touch with.
Not that I keep in touch with. Our paths cross.
Oh, your paths cross.
Our paths cross.
Okay.
I was at a conference, and he was a salesman for a sporting goods
for goodness sake,
company that sells scoreboards.
Yeah.
And I was in the market for a scoreboard.
Oh, for goodness sake.
In fact, one of the legacies, next year, if you should show up on a Saturday and see a football game, take a look at the scoreboard that will be out there.
Interesting.
And we've gotten it free.
Great. Great.
It'll have a digital display up on the top. And
Wonderful.
it'll be the best scoreboard in Suffolk County, as the company tells me. But anyway, Andy was Andy. I mean, there are an awful lot of negative things that somebody could say about Andy if you took side A.
Mm-hmm.
And an awful lot of positive things if you took side B.
Absolutely.
And you could actually choose sides with the people that were around at that time.
Sure. And Joe
McGalley,
also, who retired a few years
Joe
ago.
McGalley, Andy brought Joe in.
Yes.
And then they didn't get along too well.
Oh, I was not aware of that. Okay.
Well, Andy was the boss, and they fired him.
Okay.
And kept the underling,
okay.
Joe.
All right.
Which Andy said, you're not allowed to do that.
Oh, geez. Okay.
And Andy fought it in court and won.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And then later they fired Joe also.
Yeah.
I guess athletic directors. It's
Let me ask you if there's anything that I have forgotten to ask you. Is there anything that we should have talked about, Chuck, that we've left out?
We've talked about an awful lot.
We sure have.
I don't think so.
Okay.
I think, we could sit down and do this exact same thing again and find other things to talk about.
Sure.
It's difficult. On the one hand, you ask me questions about my life.
I know.
On the other hand, my career here, I'm 55 with 33 years in here. That's a lot of talking.
Yes, it is.
That's
a lot of ground.
That's a lot of ground to cover. And an awful lot of good things and an awful lot of bad things. Like when I say at my retirement dinner, I used as an example the program, I don't know if you remember this TV program, Mama.
Sure I do.
And this person starts out the narrative in the beginning of the program and says, I remember this, I remember that, I remember the other thing. Then at the end he says, but most of all, I remember Mama.
Yes.
And that was the program.
Yes.
So I started out that way and went to a bunch of things that I remembered.
Yes.
And then at the very end of that, I said, and they were funny things. And they were good things and funny things. And then at the end of it, I said, and I mentioned Frank Makowicz, which very few people would ever know who he was, Guy DiPietro, and other people, Ray Perez, and I remembered 6 or 7 people that died, and I remember them. Nobody around here knows Bobby Blatz. Bobby Blatz was a guy who died on a football field. Yes. And we named the football field after him, or we wanted to, and his parents were suing the school district so they wouldn't accept it. But in the minutes someplace of the Board of Education meeting, there was a thing that said in memory of Bobby Blatz. Mm-hmm. I remember Bobby Blatz.
Yes.
I don't think that there's 5 teachers or 5 people in the district that remember Bobby Blatz. So have we covered everything? Yeah. Everything we could in this amount of time, but kind of hard to put 33 years, into this time.
You've done a wonderful job, and I can only thank you for taking the time out to spend it.
My pleasure. Here. Get away from my office. What are they going to do, fire me?
Chuck, thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks. Thank you.